What it do, KTTV? This is KT, and I'm coming at you live with another episode of the Daily K Podcast. And on today's episode, we have Fort Bend County District Attorney, Mr. Brian Middleton. Today, Mr. Middleton is going to talk to the KTTV audience about his campaign and how he became the first African American district attorney in Fort Bend County, the district attorney's role in education, bail reform, and more. Stay tuned. How's it going, man? Thank you, Mr. Middleton.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Like I said, I know it's busy. I know you got a lot on your plate. Fort Bend is a big county.
It is.
And so, just thank you for coming by, giving some of the information to the audience, and one of the resources we never get back, which is your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it. It's a great opportunity.
So I guess just jumping right into things. Like I say, I read up on you, but for the people who don't know, as we get into your accomplishment later, give us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of background, and how you end up to this point.
Houston is my home. Raised in 3rd Ward. Went to Lamar High School. Went to University of Houston undergrad and then TSU for law school. So I'm a local product. My father's an attorney. I have a sister's attorney, and that helped to form my steps and lead me in this path. But I'm real proud of my community and where I came from, and I had a lot of role models in 3rd Ward, a lot of positive leaders who I was watching. They didn't know I was watching them, and they inspired me. And I have a father who some say he'll fight a fence post. Okay. He's a tough guy. Never afraid to argue, never afraid to stand up. And so I was watching him growing up and seeing him being an advocate for the community and for us, his family. And so I had this role model right there in front of me in my house that inspired me, one, to protect others. I've always been the type of person, I hate bullies, and if I see somebody being bullied, I'm going to intervene. Now, you can say what you want to me, I'm like, whatever. But if I see you trying to take care or take advantage of someone else, then it's going to piss me off, and it's going to get me going, and then I'm going to get involved. And so that's why I ended up going to law school, because I wanted to protect people.
Going back and talking about the family life, like you say, dad attorney, you attorney, sister attorney, but you went for money. So was it something that he was still instilling, or he gave you the freedom to kind of say, but y'all chose that path?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. My father was surprised that I went to law school. He tried, he had his little speeches and everything, and why law was great. But I spent a lot of time watching him, and it just seemed like all he did was read. He was a federal lawyer, so he worked for the federal government. So I would go up to his office, and you could hear a pin drop in that building, because it was a head-down job, and everybody was reading, typing, doing something. So I was just like, man, he reads a whole lot. They don't look real exciting. Then I saw him in action in the courtroom, and I was just like, okay, maybe I could do that. And so the idea started to grow. But then later on, I discovered that I like to read and I like to write. So I think some of it was innate.
Just in the bloodline.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's And so now you done decided to go to school. I'm in law school. Talk about that struggle. Were you already an established family man, or how did this go before that?
I didn't have any children. I did have someone I was engaged to. So I was in a committed relationship the whole time I was in law school, within 10 on getting married,
So that was just that support system?
Yeah, support system. I had my own place and everything. I can tell you that first week of law school at TSU, they had this orientation. Man, it was so rough. It started on a Monday, and by the time Friday came along, I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do this.
Just that fast.
Yeah. And Dean Douglas at the time, he was dean of law school, he showed this movie about this Native American trying to catch an eagle. And pretty much the moral of the story is that it's your eagle to catch, meaning that, if you want a law degree, you've got to get it yourself. You can't rely on professors to spoon feed you or figure out the path. You've got to go in there and grind and use your grit to get it.
Yes.
And then the very last speaker was Judge Calvin Botley. And he said, I'll never forget, nothing ventured, nothing gained. No pain, no gain. And so at that moment, I said, okay, he's talking to me, because right now I'm having some doubt. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go through all this drama. Because the professors were talking about how hard it was. And it used to be this show called The Paper Chase. And there was this professor on there, Professor Kingsfield. And he was real strict. You know, if you're not prepared, you get kicked out. And I mean, they do all that in law school, and they gave us a sneak peek. They talked about how many people fell out. I mean, it was just really negative, okay? So by the end, I was just like, I think I just need to go hit the streets and find me a job.
Yeah,
but that last day, and they brought it home, and Judge Botley's, his last speech, I said, okay, I'm gonna do it. So it worked out pretty good for me.
As you began that career, what kind of pushed you to be a criminal attorney versus, like you say, Dad was labor?
The thing about labor law is you got management and you got labor, okay? The management side is very lucrative because you represent the corporations. Okay. You get to bill hourly and you get to charge all these exorbitant fees.
Yeah.
And on the labor side, you represent the worker. And so that's the part that my father was involved in. I was with him, preparing for trial and interviewing people and trying to help people keep their jobs. And so that was part of the inspiration in him just generally being the type of person that he's the guy you go to when you need somebody to fight for you. Just period. I don't care if it was labor law, a divorce, or argument with a guy at the store. He was the guy to go to fight your battles. And so I saw that. And so I'm thinking, okay, civil litigation is a good idea. This is where I'm going. And then I had this internship at the DA's office in my third year of law school. And man, that's when I just fell in love with it. What I discovered almost immediately, it was like, man, a prosecutor has so much power. That discretion that they will is the difference between justice and injustice. They make these decisions, they make these calls for these people. And so I had the privilege of working for Carl Hobbs. He was the chief of the welfare fraud division. So and he would send me to court with these files, and almost every person I was dealing with was a person of color. And all of them were poor. All of them were receiving welfare, but whether they were selling their benefits, had too many people in their household, but those were the population I was dealing with.
Okay.
And so I saw some injustice in there, but I also saw myself in a position to make a difference. And so that's what inspired me. So I was being supervised by Carl Hobbs and going into court like I was an attorney and making decisions, negotiating with lawyers, and doing what I thought was right on these cases. So I was like, I can make a lot of difference. Now, keep in mind at the time, I had an encounter with a guy named Scott Shearhart, Houston police officer. This is a guy who unlawfully shot and killed Byron Gillum on Scott Street. And so as a young man being terrorized by somebody like that, I always had it on the back of my mind about justice. I had a strong sense of justice. And so I thought, wow, it's an opportunity to do what's right. So that's why I love my job. It's the most stressful thing I've ever done in my whole life. But the reward from it is that I have the satisfaction in knowing that I'm at the table making decisions that affect people's lives, and I have an opportunity to do what's right. And so that's the privilege of doing the job.
I can agree with you as being the most stressful, man, because just me as a school administrator,
right?
Like, and dealing with people, it's real, because you got to really be intentional about your interactions. You got to make sure you're not being perceived a certain way, and you got to have all that going through your head as you still try to get your mission out at the same time. So I understand what you're saying. So now you're doing all this work in grad school. You got the temporary card. I read up on your internship.
I had a couple of internships. I had one at the DA's office, and that's what got me really inspired about criminal prosecution. But then another important one was Judge Calvin Botley after, well, it was my third year of law school. You know, I met him initially at the beginning, during orientation, and then I had the opportunity to be one of his interns in my third year. Judge Botley is now retired, but this man is a decorated veteran that fought in the Vietnam War. To know him is to know that. I mean, he's straight soldier. You know, you come in, you work for him, you better be on time, you better dot your I's, you better cross your T's, and your grammar better be right. And so I had the opportunity to intern from him, and that probably was part of my molding, because I mean, he told me things like, don't say stuff, don't say thing, you know, use precise words. Another thing he told me, there can't be any photo finishes. You're a black man, you know, it can't be a close call. So if you're gonna win, you gotta win. Yeah. So he talked about preparation. He talked about being precise, and you know, I did a lot of writing for him. And you know, you get the paper back, and you know, it's bled to death because he picked it apart. And so having an experience like that was very formative, especially coming from a United States judge. So I think the Harris County District Attorney's internship. Then I had another internship at the First Court of Appeals, and Judge Botley's internship really helped mold me as an attorney.
An intern life.
Yeah.
Intern life, man.
Yeah.
Practice on the go. I'm telling you, but that's kind of how it was with my administration. Like I say, you go through those books and you see everything. But when it gets down to that actual person in your face, what do you do? Right. It's always good to pull from that, but handling it right then is different. And so I guess that brings me to the next question. And you probably already told me, but was there one situation where you said, man, the school didn't even get me ready for this, man. This is the real life, and it's something way different?
Because the difference in life and what the school can't teach you is how to deal with people who don't like you, whether it's because of your race or where you dressed.
That's it, though.
You know, that's what comes into play, is that people don't treat you fairly.
Yes.
And I wasn't prepared for that. You know, I was prepared for a world where people had integrity. I was prepared for a world where people valued truth, and that if you just explain the truth, then you're good. But the reality of it, our world is, you know, people believe what they believe. They have their biases and their prejudices, and they will find facts to support whatever it is they feel. And if they got a negative perception of you, sometimes there's nothing you can do to change it. And they will lie on you, they will cheat on you, they will attack you. And for me, I've always had that element in my life, so I've always had to deal with that and confront that.
I'm with you. It's just thinking, but like I've dealt with that, but I've been through all this, and I paid my dues, and I earned my stripes. Let me see if I can shake it. But you said ain't no shaking.
No, because I can tell you, sometimes you can go into a courtroom with the law and the facts on your side and still lose. Because the world's not perfect. I mean, the way, if it's a jury, is how they make decisions. They make emotional decisions. And so it may have been something you said or your client said or did that got them off track, and or it could just be people's power and influence that, you know, calls were made and decisions were made and they were against you. So that's the part of reality that school just doesn't prepare you for, is that the nastiness, the ugliness of it. You know?
That answer, what you just gave, man, was powerful, because, you know, that's reality that you got to deal with regardless of what level you make it to, you know. Qualified for the role, experience, and as I look at it, like first African-American district attorney, first Democrat in, I think, 26 years. How was the campaign? How do you feel on the other side of it?
Wow, you know, it was It was a journey. When I started, I didn't have very many supporters. The part of my story is that I run for judge in 2016. Running as a Democrat in Fort Bend up to that time had not been very popular, and most often there would be primaries, Republican primary, and the election was over because we didn't even have any Democrats on the ballot. I had become frustrated, had decided that I could not embrace the Republican platform, and I had to run as a Democrat. So I ventured to run for judge at County Court of Law Number 5. It was a new court, no incumbent. Thought it was a safe race to run without an incumbent. Long story short, mostly financed by myself, came within less than 1% of winning. I came that close. And if you were watching the results when they were coming in, there was some back and forth. So that was unreal in Fort Bend County. And that was the beginning. Yeah, that was a spark. So 2018, I was still recovering from the financial hit of running in 2016. And the opportunity came up to run for DA. That opportunity arose because John Healy, who had been an incumbent for 26 years, decided he was retiring. And as you know, in politics, it's easier to run against in an open seat than to run against an incumbent. An incumbent has huge name, ID, and influence and stuff that is hard to match. And so when he decided to retire, it became an open seat. So I was like, maybe I should do this. And so I went to my advisors, all the people I consider my closest trusted people, and it was unanimous. No, don't do it.
Don't do it. Wow.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
It's not time.
Okay.
The race is going to be too expensive. Fort Bend County's not ready. And I was just like, I don't know. I got a different vision.
Yes.
So I went against the grain. And at the time, I did not know how I would do it. I knew it would take several hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. I didn't have it. I didn't know where it was coming from.
Yeah.
But I had the vision. And something that I learned about the power of intent is that you have to have a vision. You got to feel that vision, and then you have to execute. And so I started to imagine what it would feel like to be DA, to win that race. And then I started on my vision, I started on my path, and I started to meet people that I didn't know, never met before, coming to help me. I had people in California, DC, New York, Washington coming to my aid. And I mean, I had one guy, Tharo Patel. He was working in Colorado. He was from Fort Bend County, and he heard I was running. He's like, man, I think that's great. I think the time is now, and I want to help you. He was all the way in Colorado. And it was friendships like that that helped to build this thing up. And there was some other things that happened that just made my hair stand up, chills, because it was so divine the way it came down. And I was just like, God's got his hand in this. And I got to the point to where I started to doubt myself. And I went to church that morning. I decided to go to a different church. I went to Fountain of Praise. It's the church that I frequent. And Pastor Wright, Remus Wright, gave a sermon that day. He said, I've been inspired to get this sermon again. I don't know who it's for.
Come on, man. Come on.
But I'm going to preach this sermon.
Yeah.
And man, it was designed, custom designed for me that day. Yeah. And essentially what it was that they don't know what you know. And God's got his hand on you. And and he put up this picture, and I'll never forget the painting, but there was this person playing chess with the devil, okay? And there was an angel standing over watching it, and you could see the distress in the devil's face looking at the pieces, but when you studied the board, there was one more move, okay? And that was checkmate. And so that sermon was for me. And it wasn't 2 weeks later that checkmate was called. Because then I got this huge influx of cash, and that's when all the TV commercials and everything hit. But that message was designed for me, because I was getting tired. I started to have doubt. I heard that sermon, it inspired me, and then I got a phone call.
Yes.
We're coming to help you. And that's when the floodgates opened up, and I just said, this all was divine.
Yes.
Everything that happened was God's will.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, it strengthened my faith. It is, it's unyielding at this point. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind there is a God, okay? And I live it. And so it built my strength, it built my faith, and to this day, I know that this was ordained by God, so I know my actions have to be in line with God. So everything I do every day, I'm praying and I'm trying to do the right thing every day in compliance with this calling. And so, I try not to preach, but I'm preaching right now. But
look, like you say, and something as simple as me with the podcasting, man. When I decided to take the leap, everything else has been just streamlined, because when that man got his hand in it,
that's right.
Then can't nothing stop you, man.
It cannot be denied.
Okay, I'm talking about, like you say, everybody, your advisor say, not yet, don't do it, it's not time.
Yeah.
But believe,
Right.
bet on you.
Right.
Okay, congratulations, man. Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
God.
Thank you.
So now we get in. You got the job, and so then I was also looking up, and so you had to come in and shake the staff up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So now, as leaders, you got to make them hard decisions. And so for me, it was I was the teacher, and where I got the job as administrator. And so then you go through those parts of switching roles.
Thought you were my boy, right?
Yeah. You go through that part, and so then you come in. And so then, how did it feel, man, personally and professionally, to do that shakeup?
Yeah, it was probably, at the time, it probably was the most difficult decisions that I had made in my whole life, because these were people that I knew. These were people that I cared for, and there were reasons for each one of the decisions. But every single one of them was difficult, because I knew I was affecting a person, and that person had family behind them and other lives depending on them. I had some advisors helping me and guiding me, but it was resolved. It was something I had to do in the interest of the office, in the interest of the efficiency of the office, and in the office going forward. So, very difficult decisions, and what I found is, I'm sure you have, there are no perfect decisions. You have to make decisions and deal with them and move forward. So yeah, they were difficult. They were painful, because just about every single last one of them I knew personally, and I didn't have any ill feelings towards them, but there were decisions that were consistent with and making the office better.
I guess the next part would just be, like I say, the community outreach. And so, as being in education, how does the DA office look at education, if any change since you've been in?
Right. One of the things that, there's a lot of interaction, as you know, between school districts and the district attorney's office. Discipline problems, dealing with behavior inside the school and outside the school, dealing with juveniles. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of research about the school to prison pipeline. And so I came in as that I've got to impact this. I've got to slow this down, and I got to have some input on making this not a school to prison pipeline. And so we've been working with, just recently we started collaborating with the Fort Bend Independent School District, and going to expand to other districts. But since we've been there, we've increased the diversion programs for low-level, low-risk offenders. And we're currently developing programs for restorative justice to try to make sure maybe you don't go to the detention center, but we want to provide you with services to try to make you a better person. Because kind of the thing about the school to prison pipeline is if you send everybody through the court system, then you get them accustomed, and they start to believe, okay, this is my destiny. And then you send them to hard places like TJJD, and they become worse. There is a deterioration, and so there are people, there are juveniles who've earned the right to be there, and then there are other kids who just need some rehabilitation and put on the right road. So what we're actively doing is developing programs and diversion programs to identify these kids who are in need of services, provide them the services without the stigma of the criminal justice system. And so we have a lot of informal probations. Most of these kids have some diagnosed mental health conditions, and we have to address those. And there's a lot of talk about criminal justice reform, and it means something to everybody. It's different, it's a really subjective thing. But really, I think any discussion about criminal justice reform has to include the victims. You have to have a discussion about juveniles. And when we talk about juveniles, we're talking about kids who are acting out doing bad things, bad actors. Okay, we can't just ignore it. So we have to treat it, and we have to be careful in how we treat it so we don't make a bad situation worse. We need to, at least, and the code requires, the family code requires, is that we try to rehabilitate these kids. And so we have to come up with programs that treat the problems and try to rehabilitate the children and get them on the back road, back on the back road. But we also have to keep in mind we have administrators in that who need safe zones to educate these other kids who are not acting bad. So we're trying to get that balance, because believe me, I understand what it's like being an educator. I know the difficulties that you have.
Yes, sir.
There's no panacea for all this. There's no silver bullet, but we can all work together and work towards a solution and try to get, we may not reach perfection, but we can do better. And so I have a saying in my office is when we know better, we need to do better. And so that's what we're constantly doing. We're reevaluating programs. I'm sending prosecutors across the nation to get training so we can come back and bring these innovative ideas and implement them in Fort Bend County. We have a bunch of different community committees that are community-based committees. They're members from the community that form these committees that have different functions. Like we have one on hate crimes, okay? And their job is to educate the public, hold forums, provide training, and try to prevent hate crimes and educate people on the negativity, the side effects of hate crime, trying to deter it. We have a human trafficking committee whose job is to do the same thing. And all these are community members. They're not employees of the district attorney's office, but these are people who stepped up and they say, hey, I want to be a part of the criminal justice system. I want to make a difference. So we've got about 10 committees that we have active right now, but we're always engaged with the community, always want to have feedback. If you have a problem in your neighborhood that you don't think law enforcement is handling, let us know. We'll coordinate. I have 15 investigators on my staff. They're all police officers. So what we can't get done through other means, we have the ability to do. So if we have a hot spot, we can create an operation and go in and deal with it. So if you're being victimized, we want to know that. If you have suggestions, we want to know about it. If it's something that you see us doing and we could do better. If you're a victim of a crime, come to us for protection, because we will protect you. So never be afraid to speak up, and remember, I hate bullies. So if you're being bullied, let me know. I'm your guy.
The laws are changing, I guess, around the state, around the country, as far as on marijuana, period. A lot of the people who are getting thrown away or are getting a lot of time, and then now it becomes legal or something. And so then what happens to all those people? Because 9 times out of 10, they in our community. And so then that arrest is happening, and so how are you all dealing with that?
This whole thing, I'll break it up into 2 parts: the marijuana and the bail reform. let's start with marijuana. You know, I will say right off the muscle that I'm not one of these type of people who is a proponent of legalizing marijuana, because, you know, I have friends that have been smoking as long as I know them. Okay, they're not bad people. They just like to smoke. You know, some people like to drink, some people like to smoke. So I'm not one of these type of people who condemns marijuana users. But I do recognize that there has not been enough research on the side effects of it. I think anytime you're introducing something into your system that alters your mental state, you got to check that out. And so, but what's happened legally is that the federal government changed the definition of marijuana. Okay, there's cannabis and there's this THC. Both of them come from the same plant, you know, the cannabis plant. And so this whole CBD oil and THC, when you see it, it smells the same, it looks the same, but the amount of the THC, which I won't even try to pronounce the chemical compound, but that's the legal part of it. That's the part that has hallucination effect. That's the part that makes you high. And that's the part that people smoke. But the other part of the plant, the cannabis oil, which, you know, a lot of people talk about, does have some positive effects. So the federal government said that any cannabis that is 0.3 or higher is illegal, and we're going to call that THC. And anything less that has a concentration of less than 0.3 is not illegal. So when a cop pulls you over and you pull out cannabis or marijuana, they can't look at it and say that's the illegal kind. It has to go to a laboratory, and the consistency of it has to be tested. So the legislature last session changed the law in compliance with the federal law, but they didn't provide us with the methodology and the testing to make the distinction. So right now, I got a notice last week that DPS, Texas Department of Public Safety, which does all our chemical testing, has developed the test to make that distinction.
Okay, on the spot.
Right. Yeah. Well, it took them all this time. See, this went into effect September of last year.
Okay.
So it's taken them all this time to develop a test to do it. Now it has to be tested and validated before it's used. But it's there's only enough money to test felony marijuana amounts.
Okay.
So again, here we are back at the same point. We have no way of testing marijuana in amounts that would be considered a misdemeanor. So there's been this de facto legalization of marijuana. Right now, if you get caught with a felony amount, you get caught with, some pounds, you're going to jail, and we're going to prosecute you, and we're going to pay $300,000, $500,000, whatever it is to test it. But this is a national movement. It started at the federal level. There are a lot of people who are interested in profiting from marijuana growth, including Texas. So my prediction is in the next few cycles, we will see the legalization of marijuana in Texas.
Okay. So, man, and I was like, nah, them boys ain't budging. But like you say, the economic piece
too much money.
is a serious piece. Yeah, because you think about California, then you think about Colorado, and just the amount of money that it makes from that. But I know it is a struggle, because even when I go to my principal meetings, they talking about that, and so they talking about that 0.3, and so, just how do we really police that?
The Constitution, the whole purpose of bail is to ensure a person's attendance in court, and the whole cash bail system has kind of gotten out of hand. But what we're trying to do locally in Texas and other states in which you're seeing is trying to get the state system in line with what the federal system has been doing for a long time. People should, you have a drug dealer, got a lot of money, got a lot of cash, you got $100,000 in his back pocket. He gets arrested and he posts his bond, he gets out. You got another guy who gets arrested for DWI, don't have any savings, he sits in jail pending trial, because he can't afford to get out. But this guy, because he's criminal and he's got a bunch of cash, he gets out. So it's discriminatory. And so with the system, what we're trying to do with bail reform is make it fair. And people who are out, it should be based upon their safety, safety to the community. Are you a risk to us? Are you a flight risk? So the decision should be a risk assessment instead of a financial assessment. And so for the people who are flight risks or who are danger to themselves or others, there need to be precautions. Some of those people need to stay in jail until we have a trial. But nobody should be in jail simply because they can't afford bail. That's the wrong decision.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. And so with the risk assessment, is there something where y'all kind of look at all that information as y'all process them, or how does that go?
Well, the proposed, what we have doing, we want to do a version of what they're doing in Harris County. I don't agree with everything they're doing in Harris County, so we want to do a modified version of that. But the risk assessment is a scientific tool that was developed by the Arnold Foundation and licensed by Noble Corporation. But it's a scientific measurement where you take the person's information, including their criminal history, employment, family size, all these different factors that are then scored and presented to a judge and saying this person presents as a high risk or not a high risk.
Yes.
Judge takes that information, the background information, then makes a decision. What type of bail should this person, cash bail, personal bail, should they have conditions, should they have an ankle monitor, and that is what we're trying to get to.
Yes.
So we're making decisions based on the safety of the community and not on just financial, because historically the system is, you have a bond schedule, you get charged with this, then you pay $5,000, get out $30,000, whatever it is. And you can see how that would have a disparate impact.
Yeah.
So again, know better, do better. But in this situation, we're trying to follow United States constitutional law to avoid being sued, like Harris County got sued.
Okay.
So it's even deeper than that. It's the law, it's the Constitution of the United States.
Now, I try to close out every part with just something positive for the generation going forward. And so I know that you're teaching at the school, so you already getting that opportunity to impart wisdom. And you gave us a tidbit earlier. So is there anything else that you share with your young students, who see what you're doing and they saying, I can do that, or either I want to go past that?
What I tell them, I'll say, okay, here's my sermon. But what I try to nurture them and to get them to have better self-concepts, because when you're an attorney, it's a performance job. And so you have a client who's dependent on your performance. And so no matter what's going on in your life, you have to be able to perform because it's your duty, you're getting paid to do it. And if we have negative self-concepts, if we have bad coping skills, it affects your performance. And so I try to teach them, look, whatever it is, whatever issues you have, you need to get a hold of them before you start representing people, because it's going to be reflected in your work. And if it's reflected in your work, it's going to be reflected in your income. And so I try to inspire them to dig deep, to build up, positive self-esteem, not to be so emotional, because when you're being emotional and you're in the courtroom, you have to be able to think on your feet. And so you can't be easily offended, because when you do, you can get frustrated, you won't have the proper blood flow, you won't have the proper thought process. So if you can control that and get rid of your ego, you can become a better advocate. So I try to teach them skills so they can manage that ego and control their thought processes, so they can be more rational and less emotional. Now, emotions help with motivation, but you got to be a thinker. My office, we have, I employ 79 prosecutors and about 15 investigators, about 60 other staff. So it's a mid-sized office. County is at 810,000 people right now and growing. Office will continue to grow. We're located in Richmond at the Criminal Justice Center. We provide internships for some high school students, college students, and law students.
Yes.
So we have opportunities there for students to learn. If We've hosted tours from schools to teach them about the system. But if you want to learn more about the office, you can go to Fort Bend County tx.gov and check out our website. You can come by the office. If you want to contact me, my email is simple. It's brian.middleton@fortbendcountytx.gov. But you know, I'm engaged with the community, and I want the community to be engaged with the DA's office.
We'd like to thank Mr. Middleton for stopping by and talking to the KTTV audience today. If you'd like to know more about his background in law or the community outreach programs he's instituting in Fort Bend, go to kttv.com for the full interview. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment to let me know your favorite part of this video. This is KT for KTTV signing out. 100.